heck? Okay. So one thing I see a lot of discussion about usually is actually water spotting on cars. And this is something I've discussed extensively. And the question I want to ask is, at what point does water spotting actually matter? And when is it actually going to stick? When is it going to be something that you actually have to worry about because it's going to not impact your car, but just impact how it looks? Water spotting doesn't really have any effect on the actual longevity or lifetime of parts on your car. So if you do get water spotting, it's not going to degrade the plastic or clear coat at all, but it just will make it look like your car has these weird spots on it that you've all have seen before. I want to see if I can kind of get a good angle or shot for you guys where I can show you some of these water spottings, or some of this water spotting that I've seen on my car and I have been able to polish out before, but it's just something that comes back after a certain amount of time. So you can see here all of that white spotting. That's all water spotting, just from the car existing, using it outside, running it, all that kind of good stuff. You might be like, Cole, dude, you wash your car like every freaking day. What the heck? What the heck, man? What the heck, man? What the heck? And to that I say, yes, I do wash my car a lot. And you want to know what else? It's not going to stay perfectly clean. So even though I do wash my car really regularly and I do take care of it regularly, you're still going to get water spotting, especially on this more glass-like material. So you would see it would only be on that black trim there. Whereas with the paint, you might not notice it nearly as much, or if at all. So there's a big difference in what material it's going to be on usually. Usually water spotting will be on more plasticky material or kind of glass material. And you also saw the windows had a ton of dust and a little bit of water spotting on them. So even though I'm regularly washing my car and I do dry it, it's still going to get water spotting from things like if it rains out and I use my car or anything really like that. So one thing I wanted to ask, myself is, does this actually matter? And the answer is basically no. And I've had times too where I will get water spotting and it comes out super easily. Spray and wipe. Comes off no problem. Now you'll see there's no water spots. But then there's also times, like I showed you with the black trim, where that water spotting does not come out so easily. And the difference in that situation, why that happens, is a little confusing. With glass, it's usually very easy to get out water spotting because it's a very smooth surface. So when you clean it with glass cleaner, it'll come up really easily. But if you do let that water spotting sit for a long time, it's not going to come out just with glass cleaner. And that's where you're going to need something a little more specific, like a specific water spotting remover, or just to polish the glass itself. And polishing works because it is an abrasive, so it just lightly abrases out that calcium and whatever else material is there. I'm going to get you guys on the tripod. I can't stand holding this thing. So with the different levels of water spotting you can experience, and also just the different materials it can be on, if you also have really dark paint, like a black paint, you'll notice it pretty easily on that. Just really any dark surface is where you're going to notice it the most. Most of the time water spotting isn't going to matter. It only really matters if you let it sit for far too long, and then you have to do, like I said before, you have to polish it out. And I have polished this trim before and it does come out super easily. All I have to do is use a really light finishing polish and just a really nice light blue or red pad, when those are basically finishing pads. You might need something a little more abrasive than that, depending on how deeply seated the water spotting is. But generally, that should be okay. As long as you address water spotting within a reasonable time frame, it's not going to be an issue. And that's kind of why I wanted to talk about it, because sometimes you'll feel oh, if I have any water spotting, it's just gonna be the end of the world. And it's that's not really the truth. I've had times where I'll be doing a car and some water will leak out of the door handle or off the mirror or out of the trunk, and it will cause a streak of water spotting. And usually if I'm quick enough about it, I can just wipe it up without any issues. But if you let it sit, that's where you're gonna have the problems. And for how long, not really sure. It really depends on kind of what it's like outside. If it's super dry and sunny, then it's probably gonna be more likely that the water spotting will set in sooner rather than later. And just be kind of diligent when you're working around the car of where water can fall out. Usually you'll have, areas around the door handles, mirrors, and then the trunk. Those are the 3 main gotcha points. And that's gonna be especially true if you don't have a leaf blower to dry your car off. So for us rag users, we're all stuck with this problem together, and we'll get through it together. But worry not, like I said, if you're diligent about it, you'll be okay, and you'll be able to get those water spotting out really easily. And I can demonstrate a little bit for you guys. So basically, like, what will happen is there'll be some like water running out of the handle, let's say like right here, and I'll notice it while I'm doing my drying session, so I just go and dry it up again. But then maybe I go to do some interior work, and it just keeps on happening again and again, because there's like a decent amount of water that's like stored behind the handle from just pressure washing it. So what I can do is, while I'm working around the car, I can just kind of ignore it for a while, and then maybe at the end of my detail I can just go ahead, hit it with some rinseless, and just dry it off. And on really extremely dry days, extremely dry and hot days, that's not gonna work, by the way, because if you're taking like an hour and a half to do the interior, this is gonna be long time dry. Like it's gonna have been dry for a long time by that point. You have 2 solutions. Either one is you get a DI water system so that you don't have water spotting when the water dries, and that's the ideal one, because honestly, if you dry with a leaf blower, it's going to take a lot longer than if you just dry with a hand towel. Like, just trust me on that one, it will take a lot longer. And that's the only reason I don't have a leaf blower, is because it'd basically be like close to double the amount of time. I'll get a leaf blower at some point and show you guys, but it does take a substantially longer amount of time. But there are some like really nice benefits to having a leaf blower. But anyway, that's besides the point. We're talking about water spotting. Within an hour, if it's a really hot day, you got to get that water spot out. So I've also had a video where I was doing some glass sealant, and I wanted to test it out after, and I let the water dry after I tested the sealant on accident, and I got a ton of water spotting on my window, and I literally just was able to wipe it up with ease because I took care of it right away. So that was a really cool thing to see. And it was even in places that I didn't apply the glass sealant, so it wasn't because of the glass sealant or anything, although that would be a pretty cool thing about glass sealant. And also, if you do things like paint protectant, those can also kind of take out the water spotting, so to speak. So like if you apply the paint protectant, you can kind of rub out any of those water spots that might have appeared from like residual water, I guess is the word. So there are ways to take care of water spotting really easily. So if you do get it, don't sweat too much. The real problem is going to be if you have water spotting that sticks. And for that, you usually just want to get some kind of like water spot removing chemical. And there's tons of them out there. They all do the same job. So choose wisely, my son. Theirs can only be one. And by that I mean you only really need one of the chemical. You don't need to buy 3 or 4 different brands of water spot remover. So with that, the One Bucket Army, we have concluded our session about water spotting. So I'll see you guys later. I love you guys.